Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome in. Happy Saturday. So, we're going to be painting skulls today. Hello. Those of you guys who are here early, thank you. Thank you. Like and Arts, welcome in. One of our lovely members, Broken Wing Zeal, hello. Nice to see you again. Also, one of our Patreon members, Starverse. I see some familiar faces in here. Hello. Hey, Castle. Dejinji. I hope I said that right. And Creative Calico. Shout out to all of you guys who are here. Welcome in, Vin. Another one of our mods. Hey, how are you guys doing? Today we're going to be painting some skulls, and you guys voted for gouache. This was the poll that I put out a couple days ago, so if you're a subscriber, you can vote for what you'd like to see us do on stream, which is pretty cool because I was planning to paint this in oils, but then I was like, you know what? Let's see what medium people want, and gouache surprisingly won by a milestone. So we're going to be using gouache and watercolor, and I'll talk a little bit about those techniques, my favorite brushes, and all that stuff. So let me know if you have any questions about the medium, and I hope that you're going to be painting with me today. That'd be really cool. Whether you're painting, drawing, creating digitally, it's all good. In our classes as well, you know, you can really just work in whatever medium you want. So, if you didn't know, our mission at Wing Canvas is to make art education easily accessible to everyone. So tune in live for free lessons every weekend, Saturday and Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And also, we are planning our live streams for 2025. And if you join our Discord, actually, exclamation point Discord, if you join our Discord, there is a channel there where you can submit your ideas, what you'd like to see us stream next. Or you can go ahead and add a comment in the live stream. We'll see that as well. And yeah, and if you didn't know, our growing community is filled with art nerds. Where's my little art nerds? Yeah, there we go. And if you're an art nerd, please check out the links to our social media and our website for class offerings where you can get critique, guidance, and feedback on your artwork. So feedback is like super important, right? Because, you know, nowadays especially, you can totally learn things online. You know, and there's just so many amazing resources out there. However, it's really hard to know what you're doing wrong, right? And a lot of the times, like, feedback is so important. And so if you join our Discord, or become a Patreon member, you can get critiques. So on our Discord, you can get community feedback. We have some lovely volunteers in our community, and they can give you feedback on your artwork. And if you're a Patreon member and or a YouTube member at a certain tier, you can get critiques from our instructors, which is really, really handy. And those are very, very affordable. It's a great way to learn. So if you are a member, and I see some of you guys in the chat, I want to personally thank you for supporting us and making art education easily accessible to everyone. Because we aren't just a YouTube channel, we are also a school of illustration. And yeah, all right, we're gonna get started very soon. But before we start, I just want to encourage you guys to participate in our challenge. So our challenge for November, this is Jesse's creepy chalky milk illustration from, I think it was like 2 Halloweens ago. But our we have monthly challenges in the Discord, and this is a way to encourage our students and our community to keep drawing every month. So if you submit your artwork to the challenge thread in our Discord, you can get a shout out in stream. So pretty cool. All right, so let's get into skulls. Oh, Joe, welcome in. Yeah, I know it is very cold down here, and but I'm excited for the winter because I love the ice. So, hoping to get skating even more in the winter with all of our lovely arenas and free rinks. All right. So, I'm just going to quickly introduce the medium and what I'm going to be painting today. So I have a sheet of mixed media. This is like a thick kind of watercolor paper. It is hot pressed, so it doesn't have as much tooth. And you know, you can see I'm pretty excited about my winter themed nails. Just for you lovely people. Okay, so I have a sheet of watercolor paper. I have my palette. So the palette that I'm using is called Gray Matters. And I just like it because it's like a tone. It's not just pure white. So I have a better sense of color. Like I have a better judgment of color on this, even though I'm painting on white. So we'll see how that works out. I have a set of watercolor pencils. These were from the old studio. These are pretty old, but they're just like a cheapy set of watercolor pencils. I've actually never even opened this set, but watercolor pencils are pretty cool. They're kind of like pencil crayons or colored pencils. And this little pack actually comes with a brush. But you use them exactly like you would with colored pencils, but then when you add water to them, then they turn into watercolor, which is pretty cool. So if you don't have a set of these, it might be fun, especially if you want to create some art outdoors in the summer. You know, they're pretty portable. So I have those. And then I have my set of gouache, Winsor Newton gouache. So this set was quite expensive, and this is designer gouache, so it's very, very pigmented, very good quality pigments in here. And gouache is just like watercolor, like it even uses the same type of binder. So if you didn't know, watercolor and gouache uses Arabic gum as the binder. And so it has this really nice kind of chalky quality to it. And it kind of looks like tempera paint, except tempera's binder is egg yolk, funny enough. And it's like this ancient paint, but they have similar textures. So you can see I also have a large tube of white, and this is just called gouache tempera, and I'm trying to figure out what the binder is in here, but it doesn't say the ingredients. But anyway, it's very similar to tempera, so it's not shiny. It's kind of a matte paint. Let me know in the chat if you've used gouache before. Let me know if you are a gouache user. And I'm just gonna catch up with the chat here. Hey, Kevin, welcome in. Oh my goodness, all our mods are here. Awesome. All right. Yeah, watercolor pencils are really, really fun. Just super easy to control, right? It's great. Okay, whose idea was it to put egg in paint? So tempera is so old, like they used to use it for, frescoes and stuff. And it actually lasts a really, really long time. But so the difference between gouache and tempera is that tempera paint is less flexible. So gouache is pretty flexible. Like if I put it on really, really thick, it might crack. But it's generally more flexible than tempera. So tempera would be really good for like a wall or using it on something really stiff like cardboard, because it just doesn't bend very well. So you can tell the colors I use the most is probably white. I need a new tube soon. So I'm probably going to be using white, black, yellow, and red. Today I'm going to be using my Zorn palette. And what I'm going to be painting is I'm going to be painting from life. So I have this plastic skull here. And I'm going to be really just like, I'm putting it right here. And it's going to have a brush between its teeth. Just a fun little still life that I will demonstrate. So here, it's biting the brush. So I actually am painting from life, and if you can get your hands on a skull, even if it's like a plastic one, as long as it's anatomically correct, it's really, really, really handy. A really good way to practice. And yeah, I do love my Zorn. It's a very natural palette, and I have lots of videos on the Zorn palette, including how to mix your like a complete Zorn color wheel. So if you want to check that out, you can just Google Wing Canvas Zorn after you watch this. Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm very happy with my my nails. They make me happy. So the brushes I'm going to be using today, I'm going to talk a little bit about them. I don't usually use this many brushes, but I figured I would just kind of go through all of them. So this is a Hake brush, spelled H-A-K-E. So this is like a Japanese watercolor brush. It's about an inch in width, and it's very, very soft. And I really, really like Hake brushes because they hold a lot of water. So I would probably use this to paint a wash in the background, right? So if you're working with watercolor, I highly recommend one of these because it just holds so much water that it's really, really great for flat washes. It's great for painting clouds. So I always have one of these, and I really like the big one. So I have like a 4-inch Hake brush, which is like this big, and this is just a 1-inch. And then I have, so this is a filbert brush. It's a very, very soft synthetic material. And it's kind of like a cheapy, no-name brand. I just got a set on, I think I got these on Temu. It was kind of like a free item, and I was like, well, I can always use brushes, and, you know, if they're junk, then I'll just use them for acrylic, because those will kill your brushes anyway. So this is a filbert, so it's round at the top and kind of square at the bottom. And then I have a, this is like a flat brush. So there are flat brushes and there are bright brushes. So flat brushes are longer, bright brushes are shorter. I don't like bright brushes because I find that they don't hold enough paint, and also they get really gunky up here, and then they start to do this, right? And then they don't have that nice edge anymore. This is a teeny tiny filbert, which is handy. Like these brushes are really good for painting curves and painting things like portraits. These brushes, the flat ones and these ones have kind of a diagonal to them. These ones are good for landscapes and like really technical pieces where you need a really, really sharp edge. So like this. So yeah, and then this is just a classic round. So this is like a number 2, and usually I'll use like a number 8 or a number 12 because I find that the number 2s don't hold enough. They just don't hold enough water. So I'll only use them for details. Now this is a Chinese watercolor brush. I had to go and find it in like a Chinese art gallery, and they're really, really hard to find, but I'm sure you can buy one online. These ones also hold a lot of water, and they're just really, really nice to use, very soft. People use them for calligraphy and for Chinese painting. So the only thing I don't like about them is that they shed. So if you're using any brushes that shed, you want to make sure you de-shed them before you use them. All right. Oh no, you're so sad you can't find any art stores. Well, you can always look online. They're right now, you know, there's a lot of art stores that have to stay competitive and, you know, sell art materials online. So I get some of my art materials from Amazon. But I like to support my local art stores. All right. So the other things I have some painter's tape. And if you are working with watercolor or with gouache, you probably want to tape things down, right? So while I'm taping this down, the name of the stream is stop making these mistakes with your skull art. So if you painted a skull before, let me know in the chat. What went wrong? What went wrong in the process? I would say 90% of the time it's proportions. And it's kind of like proportions are kind of like the root cause of a lot of things in art that goes wrong. You know, when something looks wonky or just doesn't look quite right, it's probably your proportions. But common mistakes that I see, especially in painting, in the context of painting, is that a lot of people will just start a painting without thinking about a composition. And I think that that's a big mistake because it's very hard to change your composition after the fact. I mean, you could crop it, I guess. You could cut it off. I mean, if you're working digitally, it's a lot easier, but in a traditional painting sense, it's very tough until you have a good composition figured out. So part of what I'm going to be doing today is just kind of talking about composition and kind of showing you my process of how to compose a very simple picture. The other thing, the other common mistake that I often see is that people will not like warm up or sketch anything before they start painting. And so I will always encourage people to, especially my students, to do a little bit of sketching. So, symmetry is a lot of trouble? Yeah, totally. Creative Calico says, I tend to get confused in around the upper jaw and how that connects to the rest of the skull. Yeah, that's a tough one too. So I can go over that. Oh, hey, Arunya, welcome in. Arunya is one of our Drawing Foundations teachers, and she's behind the scenes today. Welcome, welcome. Over detailing? Yeah, totally. Okay, so let's do a little bit of drawing first. But before we draw, I want to show you something pretty cool. So this is a age progression of 3 skulls. And you can see, so this is from Tom Tipp's experiment. It's a exhibition space in Europe, actually. And basically, the skull is also known as the cranium, holds the brain and supports the face, right? And it also has a lot of sensory organs. Like it holds a lot of sensory organs, like your sinuses. It has like, you know, holds your eyeballs and all your teeth and all of that, right? So our ears are placed on the sides. So just above your jaw, right, is where your ears are. So if you put your fingers along your jaw and follow your jaw up, you will find your ears, okay? So that's kind of why I draw ears I will draw my ears very, very early in when I'm drawing a head in different directions. And it's mostly because it's a good landmark for the jaw. So I will draw in the ball, the shield, the ear, and then the nose. So the really interesting thing about children's skulls is that they're a lot rounder, right? So if you look at the child's skull, I think this is a baby skull. So it's a baby skull in the middle, a child's skull on the right, and an adult skull on the left. So yeah, the baby skull is really strange looking, but you can see the difference in proportions, right? You can see that baby skulls, their eyes are much lower on the face, the cranium is bigger, and you'll see two sets of teeth. So in this baby skull, the teeth haven't come out yet. So this baby is probably maybe like 3 or 4 months old. So you can see the teeth are still above the gums. And then the skull on the right is a child, but you can see that they still have their baby teeth, and it's kind of within the jaw, which is pretty cool to see. Okay, so as we get older, our skulls get longer and sort of stretch out. So I thought this image was really cool because I think that a lot of people know how to draw adult skulls, but they haven't really seen baby skulls. So a lot of people struggle with like children's proportions. And if you really want to study skulls and get really good at them, you can try to draw a skull underneath a face. So you can, grab a picture of any person, and then you can try to find their skull underneath, because it's a really good drawing exercise for learning heads. Okay, so let's do some sketching. Yeah, the baby teeth. Okay, so I'm probably going to be drawing a 3/4 view skull. So let's talk about some of those common mistakes again. All right, so number 1, not figuring out a composition. So this is okay if you're like studying, like if you're just doing a study. If you're just doing a study, it's fine. You can kind of draw something out randomly, right? But if you're looking for like a nice finished piece, figuring out a composition is really important. The second one is not drawing forms or structure. So what do I mean by that? So if you're, let's say, okay, you have your composition. So say, here's my composition. I'm going to draw a skull somewhere here. Maybe my focal point is like roughly there. Let's just say, and then I start drawing the skull like this. And I'm like, okay, so there's the jawbone, and, and then I just start outlining. Like, this is really bad because you're not thinking about the structure at all. You're just kind of like freehanding and just kind of drawing the outlines. So you don't want to do that. Outlines only. You want to think, so you don't want to do this. Okay. What you want to do is you want to draw the structure of the skull. So you want to start with a circle, and then kind of draw the middle line, and then draw in the jaw, right? Then figure out, where the ear is, just like you would draw a head, and then figure out where the eyes are, right? Then put in the eye sockets. And then once you kind of have everything measured out, it becomes a lot easier, right? So this is putting structure first. This kind of looks like a gorilla skull because I didn't really think about I didn't start with the structure, right? I just started with outlines. So not drawing forms and structure is another mistake. Number 3 is not considering a background or context. So what does this mean? Basically, like if you were to draw your skull, and this leads into value design, right? It also leads into color unity. So value is an element of art. Unity is a design principle of design. Okay, so what does this mean? If you are not considering your background context, it just means that you are, you know, doing a line drawing just like this. Like here I have the brush, right? Here's my line drawing. But like it's just line. I'm not considering what I'm going to do for the background, what value the skull is, and what value the background is. So what you actually want to do is you want to consider what is around, right? What's around your subject. So if this is my composition, right? I'll give that a little bit more space. So if this is my composition, and I'm going to be very, very messy with my composition because it doesn't really matter. It's just I'm trying to figure out things like value design, right? You don't want to spend that long on it, and you don't actually need to. It's just sort of like a plan. Okay, so a very, very loose plan. So value design is like, okay, if my skull is white, right? Or let's say light. And I want a design that has a lot of range in terms of value. So let's say this is my dark, then I have my midtones, then I have my lights, right? If my background is light and my skull is also light, it's not going to stand out very well, right? The only thing that's going to stand out is the are like the eye sockets and the nose, which is probably fine. Like this is probably my main focus anyway, right? So I'm also not considering like shadows, right? So let's say my light source is coming from this direction. That means I have like a faint shadow kind of going in this direction. So I have my darks here, and then I probably want some more contrast, right? So maybe I'll use like a midtone or something along the background, right? So this is planning a composition. A composition isn't just about placement. It's also about values, right? Because your values will help you get more contrast in the areas where you want people to focus. Okay, so if I made this background a little bit darker, then I can still leave the bottom white, but I'm leading the eye to the area of more contrast, right? Which is like here. So along the edge, we'll have more contrast. Maybe I can go even a little bit darker, right? Along the top edge of the skull and kind of have like a gentle gradient, right? So this gives the skull a lot more contrast. And then maybe I can bring a little bit of that mid-tone up, just a little bit. And then let's say there's like a shadow for the brush, and then like a shadow, right? So you can see I spent maybe 3 minutes on this sketch, and I can get a good sense of composition already, right? Because I'm thinking about my values. So if you have like a simple value scale like this, like just a 3-step one, it will really help you think about a value design within your composition. Color unity is another thing. So like color unity, so value is more important. Color unity is just like if you're working digitally and let's say your skull is, or even traditionally. So my skull is kind of like a beige color, right? It's not pure white. It's like a beige color. So if I want to think about like color design or color unity, I would want to have some of the beige maybe in the background. Or if I want to use like the opposite color of beige, which is probably like a bluish purplish color, right? That would give me the maximum amount of contrast, but then I would want some of that bluish color on the skull, because if it's around the skull, then it's going to be on the skull because of bounce light. Okay, catching up with the chat. Do you guys have a video on how to draw instruments? We actually don't. That's a good topic. What instrument do you have in mind? Gummy says, oh, basically you're trying to make the main thing pop. Yes, exactly. It's all about your values and contrast. So doing a little sketch like this, like a value sketch or a value composition, is really great before you paint. Because even if you're like, okay, I did it, but I don't want to do it, I want to change it, at least you have something like a starting point, right? Okay. I wish I had Discord. My parents won't let me use it. Oh, that's too bad. Well, we're also on Instagram. You can find us there, and we have a TikTok account. All right. Electric guitars. Ooh, that would be fun. Yeah. That would be a fun stream. Okay, so I did my sketching. Okay. So now I will start with a composition in mind, I will start to paint this out. So you can see that my composition was vertical. However, my drawing is, or my painting is horizontal. So I'm just going to extend this a little bit to sort of match my composition, right? So maybe I want to cut it like there. So this is where you can kind of play with your composition, where you want the frame to be before you commit to your painting, because it's really hard to change afterwards. All right, we were just talking about composition actually in my drawing class. And my students are, you know, sending in their pictures and whatnot, and saying, "Is this a good composition? Is this a good composition?" And so we've had a lot of fun just kind of like figuring out like what makes a good composition, and what makes a bad one. So we can talk about that if you guys have any questions. All right, so I'm going to start off by doing a drawing, and because gouache is opaque, it allows me to cover up that drawing somewhat, right? So I'm going to start using my watercolor pencils, and let's see, I'm going to probably find a gray, and maybe like a brown. And there's a white watercolor pencil. Like, I wonder what that would look like. Maybe I could try some highlights with it. We'll see. Okay, so let's start by sketching out the skull itself. Can you guys hear my pencil strokes? Maybe you can't because of the music, but let me know. I know, I love crispy pencils. My students in my classes will always say, like, Faye, you're obsessed with sharpening your pencils. And I get, like, genuinely upset when my pencils are dull. It's a pet peeve of mine. Dull pencils. So if it helps you, you could actually draw out a head shape, right? Because skulls are heads. They have the same type of shape, right? So if you want to start off with your ball and shield, you can do that. And then there's kind of like a flat part of the skull, right? You'll recognize it in the Loomis method. So where the head starts to flatten out on the side, it's actually very visible on a skull. So I'll show you. So it's this bone right here, right? That's kind of like the flat area. And you'll probably notice that the skull, sorry, my camera's really close, but it's not a perfect circle, right? It's a little bit flatter here, it's pointier here, and it's kind of flatter here. But I don't draw all of those nuances in the beginning. I kind of start with my circle, and then I will add these variations to it. You'll also notice that the side of the skull is actually an oval, right? So it's actually longer from the side than it is from the front. And again, everybody's skull is different. It depends on the age and ethnicity and gender. So, you know, if it's a little bit off, it's fine, right? Because not everybody's skull is going to be exactly the same. Okay, so this is like exactly how I would draw a head, right? And I'm going to draw in my brush. Just keeping it really, really loose. Yeah, my mic is set to not pick up these little sounds, but I can hear the pencil. I can hear myself, even though I've got headphones on. I can still hear the pencil. Yeah, one of my favorite things too is drawing with a very, very sharp pencil. Okay, so now I'm kind of modifying the shape. Okay, so I did a quick composition, I did a value sketch, and now I'm thinking about my horizon line here. Be right behind, and then I'm starting to draw out my structure. So flattening stuff out. Halloween is actually a really good time to buy a plastic skull. There are some that are really badly made and they just kind of look goofy. So try to get like an anatomically correct one. So funny, when I went to art school, my painting instructor, I think it was, put a anatomically correct skull on our materials list. And I remember this was a long time ago, but I remember it was like $50 for me to buy a plastic skull, and this was probably over 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And then so I had this skull, and it was kind of like my friend, you know, because I was going to school and I was living in student housing, and I didn't really have any well, I did have roommates, but you know, nobody like shared my room with me but this skull. And so we became pretty friendly, this plastic skull. And then so when I went to school in the States, in Pasadena, and then when I came back to Canada, I brought my skull with me, and my grandmother was very scared of this skull because she's kind of superstitious. So she made me throw it out. She's like, it's a bad omen. I don't want it in the house. So I still miss my skull. I don't actually know what I did with it. Maybe I think I gave it to one of my students. So now I have this cheapy plastic skull and not an anatomically correct one. Because the anatomically correct ones actually have a cool feature where you can like take off the cranium and you can look at the structure inside, which is pretty cool. And I was wondering if watercolor pencils erase, and they do. It's a nice bonus. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind when you're drawing teeth on a skull is that they are round, right? So you want to think about kind of like two cylinders that are on top of each other. And usually these cylinders are a bit misaligned because the bottom teeth are below the top teeth. So most people have an overbite, right? It helps us with our chewing. Okay. So you also want to double check your proportions. So you want to check that the eyes are roughly in the middle of the skull, right? It's roughly in the middle. And that the nose is in the middle. So it's like sitting in between this midline. And if you are drawing a 3/4 view, that the eye sockets will be roughly the same size, except depending on how your skull is turned, it's probably going to be like this eye socket is going to be less wide than that one, right? Just slightly. So I'm going to do a little bit of experimenting and see if I can kind of lay out this painting pretty quickly using gouache and then draw a little bit on top using watercolor pencil and then painting again. Because typically I don't like to do too much drawing before I paint because then I'm scared to cover up my lines, right? If I have these perfect lines, then I'm less inclined to paint over them. And I find that that can limit the sort of like the effortlessness, or I'm thinking about like how to stay within the lines instead of being more painterly. Okay. Just gonna have a drink of water. Creative Calico says, I like our uni's approach to teaching. Anytime they teach you something, they'd call it a way to do it and told us if you find another way, that also works good. Absolutely. I think it's really important to remember that with art and design and creativity, like there are a million ways to solve the problem, right? It's not like one way or the other. So the common mistakes I told you guys are probably, you know, just the basics, and all rules can be broken, right? Okay. All right, so I have a clean container of water off to the side here. And this is about as much drawing as I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a nice wash with my hake brush, and thinking about, you know, the areas where I want to go a little bit darker, kind of like around the skull, and just sort of laying in a background so that I'm not starting on pure white. And I haven't really thought about the background color yet, but since I'm using the Zorn, I will probably just use black. I can add a little bit of warmth to the black as well, so... And this black gouache exploded on me in my backpack, and it's like super stinky. Ugh, it's very stinky. I don't know what it's made of, but it's very stinky. I got my yellow. This is Permanent Yellow Deep. So it's a yellow that is a little bit red in tone, right? It's a little darker. And then I'm using Primary Red. And I kind of put my red and my black together as they're darker on the spectrum. And I probably took out too much red. And my zinc white. So I personally like titanium white better. Zinc I find a little bit more transparent than I would like. Okay. So if you didn't know, a Zorn palette consists of black, red, yellow, and white. It can be any yellow and any red, but generally if you use your primary red and your primary yellow, you will have a greater color range. What am I going to paint the yellow with? I'm probably going to put yellows within the skull. So that's what I will use it for. But first of all, I'm gonna kind of do I'm gonna put a little bit of warmth into my background. So right now I'm just kind of mixing a little pool of this background color, and I like using a palette knife to sort of squeeze out all of the color first and just kind of keep it on my palette. You'll notice that the Hake brush, look at the side of it, right? It's pretty cool. It's kind of like sandwiched, right? Sandwiched in between this wood. So I am working wet on dry, and so that this has to be done pretty quickly. My brush is hitting my mic. Okay, so this is really just for a tone in the background. Right, because sometimes like I don't like brush strokes in the background. I kind of want it to be as flat as possible, which is why I like these bigger brushes. And then the other thing I'm probably going to do is just start to create a little bit of a vignette around my piece. I've got a paper towel here, and just using water, I'm just going to start to blend it. So you can remove a little bit of it. So now it already has a little bit of atmosphere. That's kind of nice. And I'm probably gonna go, once it's dry, to do another coat. But I think that's enough for now because I had planned for the outside to be a mid-tone. Okay. Watercolor stresses me out because of how quickly you have to work with it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, watercolor is probably the most finicky medium. It's definitely not my favorite. I mean, I love the look of watercolor. I think it's beautiful, but it's very difficult to work with. So you can see it's a little bit streaky. So what some people like to do is they like to wet the entire background and then just kind of let the water sort of do the blending. But because I'm working with gouache, I kind of want to use a, eventually I want the background to be all painted. So right now I'm just kind of working with a wash. Okay, so let's start by figuring out the color of the skulls. So our skulls are a little bit beige, right? So I didn't mix any white into the initial wash, so it's very transparent, but here is where I'm going to mix in my white. And the skull actually from the side is pretty dark. So you can see I kind of mixed the same gray as this palette, which tells me it's kind of like a warm gray, but right now I'm in the mid-tones, right? So once I put it down like this, you can tell that this is the shadow color and sort of the color of the side here. Thank you. You like my gray, huh? Yeah, I like mixing grays with different colors because I find that when I paint using just black and white, the gray is very cool. And I don't like how that looks all the time. So right now what I'm doing is I'm kind of squinting at my skull and trying to capture the forms by just focusing on the darks and the lights and sort of building up, like prioritizing the structure versus the details. So for example, this entire part is dark. So you can see what I mean by, this is going to cover up a lot of my drawing. So that's why I'm not super committed to the drawing, but I do follow the structure that I set out. So the structure is the most important part of your drawing. Everything else is kind of secondary. So gouache is a little bit easier to blend than something like acrylic just because it is water-based, right? So you can essentially lighten things as you go, and it will pick up some of the color underneath, but it's pretty versatile. However, gouache dries a slightly different color than when it's wet. So it's like nearly impossible to paint a good grayscale. You could paint a gradient, but to paint like a perfect grayscale is so hard with gouache. So if you're painting like on a grayscale or something, like oils or acrylics would be better. The way I had to make a perfect grayscale in my design class in university was paint a bunch of swatches and then cut them out and then assemble a perfect grayscale rather than trying to paint them next to each other. So I'm squinting like mad here. Do I ever use masking fluid when masking backgrounds like these? No, I don't really use masking fluid. A, because I don't really paint in watercolor that much. I did buy a bottle when I was in school because I learned, because it was part of the materials list. But I think I would use it if I was painting like a landscape that, or a nightscape specifically, that had like a sun, sorry, that had a moon. I used it once to mask a moon. But now I just use crayon or wax. I will start to, you know, if I know that I'm gonna leave a spot for something bright, then I will just use wax resist, which is like, you could use a candle, you could use a crayon, or you could use oil pastel as a mask. And I kind of like that better because masking fluid, you have to paint it on, but with crayon you can just draw it on, and I like the texture that it leaves. So you can see that the background color, even though the background color has yellow in it, it feels very cool, right? As soon as I've kind of blocked in the yellowish color of the skull, it tends to, you know, by contrast or by comparison, because of the context of the warm and the cool, my background color is looking a little bit purple. Why am I not using a color palette board? What do you mean a color palette board? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Like this is a palette. It's a wax palette, and I just chose it because it's nice and easy. I have various palettes that I use. Okay, so I'm going to block in the teeth. So you can see how rough I start out, right? Like, even though it's very rough, you can see that it's kind of a, you know, it's a skull. Because I'm focusing on structure, I'm only really using 2 values. And it's pretty messy, but it's, the form is starting to emerge. Okay, so let's see. Vin says your least favorite part is shadows. Oh, my favorite part is shadows. Hopefully I can help you get over that fear a little bit. Okay, so let's put in the darks. So I don't really love using pure black. I find that it can be kind of flat looking. So I mixed my black into a brown with a little bit of yellow and a little bit of red. And, you know, if you want something to be warmer, you add the yellow. If you want something to be cooler, then you add the red. But if but then if you want it to be, like one way that you can make things cooler with yellow is if you add white to it. So if you're using black, and then you add yellow and then you add white, you'll kind of get this greenish tinge. So you can see a little bit of that green over here, right? It's not actually green, but it looks green because of the colors around it. Speaking of which, the Chevreul's rule of color interaction means that colors will appear differently depending on what's beside it, right? So we're actually working on a video about Chevreul's rule. It's a pretty interesting video, so that should be released soon. Generally, the eye sockets are a little bit geometric, so they're not perfectly round. They are, they're kind of more squarish, but on a tilt. So kind of think about it like sunglasses. And this brush is getting a little challenging to use here when I'm painting the eye sockets. But I'm gonna try to do as much as I can with one brush. Mostly because I already have the color on this brush, and it's annoying to change halfway through. So the nose, the socket of the nose is a heart, like an upside down heart shape. And those are like pretty much all the darks that I see, but once I get this dark color in, and it's like there's very, very high contrast, I'm gonna start to put in the other darks that are part of my composition. So the brush, so like the end of the brush here. So instead of painting everything separately, I think the best thing for me to do is just to paint in the entire silhouette of the brush so that I can make sure that it's straight, you know? Oh, I do not like that brush. Okay, I'm gonna move on to a flat. I don't like the tilted brushes. Some people really like them. I can use it and if I have to, but I just not huge on it. And so you can actually use gouache just like watercolor. You can use them together as well. I'm just using a ruler to make sure that my brush is actually connected and not disjointed. Bye, Joe. Yes, I will keep my stick on the ice. I sometimes hold it with one hand, and I'm not supposed to do that. Broken Wing Zeal says, Chevrolet's rule makes color picking in the beginning a little tricky when redrawing a reference, especially skin tone. It totally does, yeah, but I think it's one of those things that you learn the more you do, right? So theory sometimes is not as helpful as practice. Like, it's helpful to know, but it's very hard to learn as a concept. You really have to have that experience, make those mistakes, right? To then learn how you should have done it differently. So that's why, like, in the beginning, when you're drawing and it looks terrible, don't give up. All of those terrible drawings are helping your greater mission in the end, right? Which is to build your skill, you know, whatever you are learning drawing for. It's you kind of have to get the bad stuff out of the way first, right? Just get it out of the way. So every bad drawing you do, you just kind of, instead of beating yourself up for it, just be like, the next one will be better. The next one will be better. I really should use a round brush for this part. Okay, so now let's get some of those shadows in. So shadows. Hey, Ryan Mead, welcome in. So Broken Wing Zeal, if you tend to make it too desaturated, that's okay. Like, just focus on your values. Like, your values are probably the most important part of your painting. So, you know, so for example, your shapes are more important than lines, in my opinion. And what else? Shapes are more important than lines. Value is more important than color. You are welcome to disagree with me. Like, Monet would disagree with me. Monet would be like, no, color is more important. But maybe. Monet was able to do some things with color that, like, is not the what the average person would do. Like, he would paint some of his cathedral paintings, if you've seen them, are pretty much all the same value, but the contrast that he creates is with color, and it's so cool to see, because it really is breaking the rules, right? Okay, so I'm getting some of these shadows in. So the darkest shadow would probably be right under the skull because of the ambient occlusion, and then everything else would be a little bit darker. So, or sorry, a little bit lighter. So now I'm using the small brush to kind of refine my edges. Add some more depth. So keep in mind, the first 80% of your painting takes as long as the last 20%. The 80-20 rule in painting. So that's why I try to get like 80% of my piece done within the halfway point of the stream. That's why art's about quantity versus quality, especially in the beginning. Yeah, like in the beginning, I think that, so there's a couple things. A is if you are just starting out, let me know, type beginner in the chat if you're a beginner and you're just kind of learning your foundations. In the beginning, it's very, progress seems to be pretty quick because every piece you draw, you're going to be exponentially better, right? And so it's a lot of fun, but it can be very challenging to figure things out like proportions. And you know, the best way to learn is to have a mentor or somebody to give you feedback, right? Like an expert to give you feedback. And as you make more and more art, there definitely becomes a turning point where progress slows down by a lot. And it's frustrating because you'll think like, oh, I was good, like what's going on? I'm so bad. And it feels like you're going backwards. And that's because like art isn't a straight path. And there's always new and different challenges, right? So don't get discouraged if you feel like you're not progressing. You are still progressing, but there's definitely a stage where it feels like you're not progressing as much. Lovely painting so far. Thank you. I'm still catching up with the chat here. Ryan Mead, you're a beginner? Nice. And Broken Wing Zeal? Okay. Yeah, so if you're a beginner, the best thing to keep in mind, the best advice is like, don't compare your beginning with someone else's middle, okay? Stay off Instagram, peoples. Because Instagram is like the worst place to to scroll if you want to encourage yourself, because you'll come across all these people that are putting their best work forward, and you might think, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be as good as them, and it can be very discouraging. So don't compare yourself. When you see somebody's art that you really admire, try to learn from them. Like, try to learn their techniques, ask questions, engage with these artists, and remember that they're putting their best work. You are not seeing all the ugly drafts that they've been battling. You're only seeing the stuff that they're proud of, right? People don't really tend to post their ugly work on Instagram, right? Whereas if you're working through all of your artwork in the beginning, it's nothing but ugly work. So it's very easy to get discouraged. Join a class, get expert help. Those are always really, really helpful. Join a good community, like Wing Canvas's Art Nerd community on Discord. Great community, very helpful. And a lot of our stream regulars are there helping each other out and giving good advice and posting random pictures of animals, their pets, and delicious food and references and all that stuff. So definitely check that out. Okay, so okay, so I have a general sort of I would say maybe like 80% of it figured out. So now what I'm gonna do is really, I'm gonna paint the background again and try to get more contrast this time, and maybe like straighten out or blur this edge here while I let this dry. And also finish blocking in the teeth. Anybody here using gouache? Painting with me? Broken Wings Eel says 1 year artiversary is end of next month. I have all my pieces and the progress is very encouraging. That's amazing. Yeah, that's great. Good for you. 1 year. Very nice. Same as PewDiePie. He's been doing art for a year. And his progress is also really inspiring. I know he's inspiring a lot of people on the internet. And it just goes to show that it's never too late to learn a new skill. Okay, so let's go back to the background. So I'm not going to use a hockey brush anymore for the background. Instead, I'm going to use a do I have a big flat brush? So here's my big flat brush. And I'm going to try to make the background kind of purpley so that it's like a very dull, complementary, a Zorn purple, right? So basically a purple that's made without blue. And it's just red and black. And a little bit of white. Let's take out this gouache tempera and try it out. So you see this color here? It looks very purpley. Right? This is a beautiful purple. Purple that is not made with black. Yes, it is possible, my friends. This is why I love the Zorn palette so much. PewDiePie inspired you to draw every day since May 13th? Amazing. You didn't make it structured till September. Awesome. Good for you. What do you mean by structured? Oops. Oops. When you have an oops like this, with gouache, just if you can kind of work fast, you can cover it up. That is the sound of my brush hitting my microphone stand. Doing a fundamentals each day. Yeah, that's great. We're planning a stream next year, which is like 10 things that beginners should draw. It'll be one of my streams where I will be going over some of the best things to practice as a beginner, because You know, with PewDiePie's video and stuff, like I know a lot of people, especially like younger people, will start drawing, and they'll start drawing because of fan art, right? Essentially, like they want to draw their favorite anime character, or draw, you know, I used to draw, not anime, I would draw celebrities. I always liked portraiture, so when I was a teenager, my favorite thing to draw were celebrity eyes. So I would like, I would take magazines and like just draw different eyes and see if my friends could guess who they belong to. But whatever it is you like to draw, what you like to draw is often different than what you should be drawing, right? Just like when I learned piano as a kid, I wanted to play popular music. But my piano teacher was like, no, you gotta play scales. I was like, oh, that's so boring. Do I have to? But those are the fundamentals that you really can't go without. Ooh, I like that purple. I really like this purple. Okay, so I'm going to put in a bit of a shadow. So I'm going to use this purple that I have and probably a smaller brush. So I'm going to use my filbert brush and start to put in some of these shadows. So Vin, this is for you. Even if your shadows are different, like let's say they're slightly similar in value, right? Then the skull, like this is pretty similar in value to some of the dark parts in the skull. Then I can start to shift the hue. So my shadows are this like purpley color, right? So even though it's the same value, you can tell the difference between the shadows in the skull and then the shadows on the surface, on the table surface here. I'm kind of using a dry brush right now and feathering it out. I really like dry brush texture, right? Because it allows you to add like a little bit of value and a little bit of texture. And using cheap brushes is like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do this scrubbing, right? If I was using expensive brushes, I would not scrub with them. So there's definitely a bonus to getting some cheap brushes because you can just kind of scrub them or be a little harder on them. Okay. I kind of like this contrast right here, like it's like dark against light against dark against light, and I find that it's a really nice way to draw me into the piece. Have you ever had a mistake turn into a feature? Totally. Lots of birds. Lots of extra leaves on a tree. Do I draw portraiture? Yes, I am a portrait artist. I do a lot of portrait commissions. Combining what you should be working on with what you love for the win. Absolutely. Maybe that's a good way to practice, right? Like draw something you don't want to draw, like a perspective, like a car in perspective. And then reward yourself with what you love to draw, like an anime face. My favorite thing to draw is environments from my imagination. Ooh, that's tough. Drawing environments. I've never been very good at drawing stuff from my imagination. So I very much admire people who can just kind of draw stuff out of their head. That's always been very hard for me. I mean, I can draw bodies out of my head, but like, I did a storyboard project as well, and I found that so hard just to like draw. I've always found storyboarding super, super tough. So it's a good challenge, definitely. Okay, who's ready for some teeth? Vin says, yeah, that's what I do. I draw some hands and then reward myself. Teeth! Okay, let's go. Oh, yeah. I think that a lot of people have trouble drawing teeth. And I'll kind of go over some of the tricks that I've discovered when it comes to drawing teeth. So, the first thing is don't draw individual teeth. Try and draw the forms of the teeth as a whole. So what that means is like focus on the cylinders, the cylinder at the top and the cylinder at the bottom. So before you go in and paint those individual teeth, what you want to do is you want to make sure that the cylinder is lit properly, right? So if this is round, then this part, ooh, that's a little bit too cool. Hard to match my previous colors. That's always a challenge with gouache. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that the teeth that I'm going to paint are turning in its cylindrical form before I put in the details. So I'm having a little bit of trouble getting that color. And like the more layers you paint, the thicker your paint has to be, right? In order to cover that up. So my teeth on this side have to be a lot darker. Yeah, teeth are really hard. I know they're really hard, but I think part of what makes them hard is that it's kind of like you are limiting. It's part of having a limited belief. It's mindset, right? When we think about teeth, we're like, oh my goodness, they're curvy, they're kind of organic in shape, they're not you know, they're complicated, so we think that we can't paint teeth. So instead of thinking about them as teeth, try to trick your brain into thinking that you're painting something else. So tell yourself, okay, I am painting cylinders. I'm going to draw cylinders, right? It's not I'm going to draw teeth. It's I'm going to draw cylinders. And you could draw a cylinder, right? Then after you draw a cylinder, then you can say, okay, I have my cylinders. Now I'm going to turn them into teeth. So it's kind of like you have one extra step. So taking baby steps is really helpful. Okay, so I noticed that the bottom teeth are much darker than the top teeth because they're in shadow. And the top teeth overall are a little bit lighter, like right here, right? Right in the front. So just like making sure that the curve is correct is important. And then figuring out where your center line is and then going down from your center line. So let me mix like a darkish color. You also don't want to use black to outline your teeth, right? Unless that's a style or you're painting a pirate or something. You probably want to use a slightly darker value, but overall it shouldn't overwhelm the cylinder. Ryan Mead says, I have a pretty vivid imagination, just not the art skills to get it out. That was my motivation to start art. You got interesting ideas. That's awesome. Whatever you're skilled at, you know, like I'm pretty skilled at technique. You know, some other people might be more skilled at, like my skills are in art direction, design. I'm kind of like I'm kind of just like a big design nerd, and I love not just art. I love all creative mediums. Like I love video, I love film, I love animation. Even though I'm not an animator, I really enjoy animation. I think I got into art though because I wanted to tell stories. So I went to illustration school and I wanted to illustrate children's books. That didn't end up being what I did, but I really just enjoyed the journey anyway. I didn't like all the censorship actually in the children's book industry. I remember writing a book about this little girl who, you know, didn't like to wear dresses and liked to play with mud and liked to cause trouble. She was kind of, you know, a bit of a troublemaker, and she would make these concoctions out of household products, like mixing toothpaste with, you know, squeezing toothpaste and spoiled milk and like all these things into a sink and making a mud monster to play with, because, you know, I was an only child and I would have to find some different types of creative outlets. So this was a story based on my childhood. Luckily there were no serious chemical reactions or anything from my experiments. But anyway, I really thought it was a good story, but the publisher who was looking at the book was like, "Oh, you can't say scabs, or we can't make a book about you know, experimenting with household products." I was like, "Relax, it's a children's book." But they're like, no, we can't do this, we can't do that. You can't say boogers. I was like, what? So it just kind of made me not want to do that, I guess. So it kind of turned me off on the industry. I hope it's changed, or maybe it was just that one publisher. Okay, so how I did the teeth was I started in the middle, and you know, your teeth would align in the middle, right? So find the middle, start there. The bottom teeth, you'll sort of see the top of the bottom teeth, and you don't have to draw every single tooth. You can sort of suggest them. This is a self-portrait of me in the future. With my watercolor brush. Dead Fei holding a brush in her mouth. I'm guessing, so, hey, welcome in, Seely. I'm guessing you used a reference. How do you use a reference but still make it your own work? I will show you my reference. This is my reference. I'm actually painting from a plastic skull, and it's like just over here. So I am, I made my own reference. I'm actually doing a still life today. Circa 3089. Yeah, that's fair. I like that title. I like it. Okay. But to answer your question, I'm guessing you used a reference. How do you use a reference but still make it your own work? I combine different references, so I very rarely copy a reference exactly unless it's my own. I mean, like, unless it's my own photograph, right? And even then, I don't copy my photos exactly. Just because there's always things that I want to change about it. Or, you know, maybe placement, maybe lighting. How do you make it your own? You can exaggerate, you can distort. There's lots of different ways that you can make it your own. But also, like, don't worry so much about copying. Copying is how you learn, guys, okay? I know everybody wants to be original, and you should be original, but if you're still struggling to, like, draw basic things, like, let's take hands, for example, okay? If you're struggling drawing hands, like, don't worry about making the hands your own. Or if you want to draw cartoons and fan art because that's how you learn, then do it. Like, doesn't matter. As long as you're not trying to sell it, it's okay. As long as you're not trying to, you know, sell it as your own art. Right? I did a lot of copying. In art school they like to call it master copies. So copying artwork from the masters, because you learn by, like, you're essentially, by copying another artist's technique, you're learning from their experience, right? You're kind of fast tracking everything that they learned over time and all that experience, and being able to learn their technique. It's totally fine, but it's best practice to credit them, and if they're a living artist, you know, you should always credit them. Even if they're, you know, a, like, 17th century artist, you should credit them. Or you shouldn't say it's your own, you should just say, you know, I studied Titian, or I studied Rubens, right? So I think it's just transparency and practice, and studying different art styles until you find your own and what you feel is uniquely you. Okay, so I'm adding some highlights, but it's a little bit painful because the colors are drying slightly differently, which is frustrating, but such is the nature of the medium. Thanks, guys, for voting for gouache. I'm gonna do a little bit of dry brushing because dry brushing adds some lovely textures to the painting. And you see a lot of those textures in the transitions. So the transitions are the parts of the painting that go from light to dark. Those transitions tend to have the most amount of texture visible. So I'm trying not to blend too much. I'm trying to keep it very loose. So you can see when I put it on, it looks light, and then once it dries, it gets darker. Like, gouache I find is very difficult to learn. I struggled a lot with it when I first started. And apparently I still do. I feel like, Vincent, I feel like even when I use drawings as reference, I'm stealing work. So I typically try to mash 4 to 5 different photos together. Yeah, I mean, that's good too. Or like trying to draw out of your head and then finding references, you know, for the parts that you're struggling with. That's one way to also keep it pretty original. Okay, so I'm gonna work a little bit on this brush. Sometimes I like to jump around or give my piece a little bit of time to dry and work on something else so that I can have fresh eyes. You know, if I look at the skull for too long, I stop seeing the things that I need to see because I get this blindness. And so I'm going to move on to a different area. And the brush itself is this wood color, which I haven't actually put in yet. So I'm going to work on that. It's kind of like a greenish, kind of reddish color. Like a bamboo. And maybe time to put some nice highlights on it. Okay, now let's get this brush looking more like a brush. I think this brush looks a little wonky. I do like that dry brush texture though. I think it kind of adds a nice touch to it, and most brushes are a little bit darker at the top. So I'm going to try to use like a dry brush texture, which is literally making my brush kind of dry before I paint with it. Ooh, I'm gonna try that watercolor pencil. on this brush and see if I can get some of that texture and try out that white pencil, you know, and see if it does anything. So yeah, we're about to revamp our Patreon. So definitely check out the Patreon. Like if you're learning and you're just a beginner, it's really, really helpful to have a community. We have a private community for members, but you can join our Discord for free. And it's a great place. We have about 6,000 people on our Discord, all art nerds helping each other out. And this is where we post all of our files from the streams, as well as our notes and such. So, you know, if you want to get an image of this, you can get it off our Discord. You'll also see us posted on Instagram and Facebook. Okay. So I feel like I've lost some of my values by, you know, just kind of like over blending. So I'm gonna try to do a little bit of dry brushing. Hey, welcome in, Quinn. Thanks for popping in. And congrats on your first tattoo. That's awesome. Do you think ballpoint pen is a good or bad medium? It's up to you. I mean that's a very personal question. But do I think? Yeah, I think anything that you can use is a good medium. I actually really like ballpoint pen because it is very permanent, so it doesn't allow you to erase, but it also can, unlike ink, it gives you a variety of lines. Like you can actually use a ballpoint pen, like if you put very gentle pressure on a ballpoint pen, it actually will be lighter, so you can get a good value range with ballpoint pen. So that's why I really like it. Is there no black in this set? I don't have a black. Oh, wait a minute. Here it is. Okay, so I'm busting out these watercolor pencils. So yeah, I mean, being a self-taught artist, was very difficult in the beginning. Like I would say pre-YouTube, right? But I think nowadays it's actually very easy to be a self-taught artist. But I agree, you definitely need to have the motivation, right? To draw things, or somebody to keep you accountable is really, really important. And that's what we try to do for our students, right? We try to give them projects that will, you know, not only be fun, but also help with the fundamentals. And critique, right? Critique is so important when it comes to your art journey, right? Because like not knowing what you're doing wrong can really stunt your creative growth. So yeah, join a positive community. Find an accountability partner, like whether you join a class and that's your teacher, or find a mentor, or you know, even another art nerd that you meet that's like sort of at the same level as you. You don't even have to live in the same country as them, but just so that, you know, you have somebody to keep you accountable. That's really, really important. And it's a lot easier now with the internet than it was when I was learning. I had to pay an institution a lot of money. And now there's like lots of great alternative schools like WinCanvas. And like, you know, people doing it for free, right? Artists sharing their process. So it's like the best time to learn art. The most abundant time as well than ever before. So I really like these colored pencils. Like normally I will draw on top of my gouache using regular colored pencils. That's the nice thing about watercolor and gouache, is that you can draw on top of it. And it adds a really nice texture. Right? Because like I could paint these lines, but like looking at the lines on the skull, they're pretty textured, and they're kind of like, it's kind of like it would look nicer with pencil than it would with paint, right? Because it's kind of like the lines are inconsistent, they're a little crackly in places. So I really like how this is looking with a little bit of drawing on top. I was actually planning to add more texture with the dry brush, but I kind of like the colored pencils, and I don't think that I'm going to blend them in with water. I think I'm just going to leave it. Yeah, if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button, because you can actually, you know, participate in voting for what you want to see us draw during our streams. We will typically, the creators, more often than not, we will ask our audience, you know, to vote on a topic. So tomorrow, Iggy will be streaming pixel art. So much fun. And it's not too late to vote for what you want to see him draw. I'm going to try this white. Whew, that's so nice. Okay, I answered my own question. In the beginning, when I opened up this pack, I was like, why would anybody use a white watercolor pencil? And now I'm kind of like, ooh, I just used it and it worked. I'm adding these highlights. I also really like the illustration technique of colored pencil on top of watercolor. I've always liked the technique. Oh, okay. Just taking one last look here to see if there's anything else I want to do. Yeah, the black pencil looks really effective. It does. It's nice. I didn't have to paint in these textures, you know, I could just do a little bit of drawing. I'm a big fan of mixed media and just like experimenting with different mediums, because that's also what you can do to be a little bit more original, right, with your work. So like I can darken certain areas if I don't want to repaint them. I can just add a little bit of darkness, texture, just by running my colored pencil over, adding a bit more contrast. So yeah, all the things we learned today. We learned how to mix purple without using blue. We learned all of the things that the common mistakes when it comes to painting skulls in particular, but it applies to a lot of other things. And hopefully it was insightful to see, you know, how I like to work and my techniques. Okay, so the white is not really working here as well. I was like, oh, maybe I can use some of this white and add some highlights here. All right. So if you haven't submitted any artwork and you're working on this piece during the stream, I invite you to submit your skull artwork for our November challenge. Our November challenge is Novembones. Novembones, people. We still have 7 days left, so definitely put it on in the Discord and you may get featured, which would be really fun. I love seeing all of your pieces and all of the angles and the creativity that you guys put into your work. It's really, really fun. And if you don't know about our school, Wing Canvas is a school of illustration, and there's actually 5 of us, 5 teachers. So from left to right, Iggy, that's me there, Jesse in the middle, Arunya and Josh, and we are here to help you on your artistic journey. So we love art nerds at Wing Canvas, and if you are an art nerd too, check out the links in our social media, join our Discord, and become a Patreon member for critiques and discounts on classes. And we also share class recordings, all kinds of behind the scenes stuff. And the most valuable thing is having a community and having a supportive group of people to keep you accountable. So our members community is lovely. You can attend live critiques and, you know, get feedback on personal projects. And if you do create artwork on stream, you can get feedback on it. Oftentimes I'll see our members post the artwork that they've made on stream for feedback right afterwards, and that's always really, really fun. So I want to personally thank our incredible patrons for supporting the channel and supporting free arts education. If you want to become a YouTube or Patreon member, it's only $2 a month, and you can have access to a private community. You can get all of our art files from streams and even get a monthly live class recording. So the YouTube members get these sub badges, which are kind of cool, so you can see them in the chat. And yeah, so guys, today I actually finished on time because I was working with traditional mediums that I'm more familiar with. I'm still learning digital, like relearning digital art, so I'm still like struggling on digital. So in a way, those of you who voted for gouache, you guys did me a favor. So thank you so much. I'm just gonna take off the tape because this is like the best part, right? Let's do that. Let's reveal the final nice, lovely borders here. Perfect timing. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for telling me my skull is beautiful. This is actually a self-portrait of me in the future. 1,000 years from now. I had really wanted to put a candle in this piece for extra lighting, but no time today. All right. Should I sign the piece? Yeah, I should, right? Let's sign it with this watercolor pencil. All right, guys, thank you again. Thank you so much for supporting Wing Canvas. Join Iggy's stream tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for pixel art. All right, bye-bye.